Welcome to the video edition of The Fourth Curtain, featuring this week's interview. Catch the extended audio version with Alex and Aaron's commentary wherever you get your podcasts. On with the show.
Welcome to The Fourth Curtain, friends. Today's guest is a true titan of the game industry, the legendary Mike Morhaime. Mike, did I pronounce your name right? That's not a hard one to pronounce, I don't think, right?
No, you got it right perfectly.
Okay,
Morhaime.
very good.
Sounds
That's
very
my
Mikey.
Long Island adjacent upbringing, I think, has prepared me to pronounce all names. As co-founder and longtime president and CEO of Blizzard Entertainment, Mike helped bring to life some of the most iconic this doesn't get old to hear, I hope, Mike. Iconic franchises in gaming history: Warcraft, Diablo, Starcraft, World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, Overwatch. Just an incredible run. He's now building new worlds as the founder and CEO of Dreamhaven. Mike is a Hall of Fame inductee at the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. That's a mouthful. And even accepted an Emmy Award on behalf of Blizzard for World of Warcraft. Mike, it's an absolute honor to have you here with us. Welcome to The Fourth Curtain. How are you?
I'm great.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wait, what's the Emmy about? I didn't know about the Emmy. What's the Emmy?
It was like technical achievement in video games, something like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
The Emmys.
But was that related to when the film came out?
No, it was way before the
okay.
film.
Way before the film. Okay. Right on. That's super cool.
And actually, the South Park episode where they featured World of Warcraft, that wasn't our Emmy, but that episode received an Emmy. So
that episode is so good.
Did you know that was
great?
Did you know that was happening?
we did, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we had a team down there working with them on helping them capture footage from the game.
That's amazing. All right. Well, so I was kind of thinking like where to start this conversation because there's so much that we could get to it. We probably won't get to everything in an hour because it's only an hour. But I thought maybe I wanted to start at Dreamhaven because I just watched you guys did like a press announcement, a reveal, and I follow the industry. I follow the industry very much. And I was very impressed with how much there was there. You know, often, a company sort of reveals what they've been working on and it's a lot of talk and there was a lot of game, especially Wildgate looks so fun. It looks so good. What have you guys been up to? Like really, I mean, I know like we saw the stuff, so we know kind of what you've been up to, but like, what's it been like starting a developer publisher and a kind of a bigger sort of thing this day and age?
Yeah. So, we've been at it for over 5 years now. And when we started, we really started with really just the founding team. We didn't know what games we were going to make. We didn't even know what we were going to call the company. We kind of had a general idea of what we wanted the structure of the company to be. We knew that we wanted to have these internal studios that felt like they had agency over what they were building, because that was really a big motivator for us for all the years at Blizzard, to feel like we were in control and able to change direction when things weren't working without a lot of red tape. And so we kind of wanted to bring forward a lot of the values and philosophies that we had that we thought helped us be so successful at Blizzard, and really build a team. There was a lot of great talent leaving these AAA publishers, and one of the ideas was to try to set up a structure that allowed us to capture some of that talent that was dispersing and scattering around. And so I think, very quickly we were able to build some very strong teams and start working on some new games. We figured out what we wanted the company to be called. And we also wanted some sort of system to help us interact with other third-party studios that we didn't fully own. And that became our partner studio program. We now have a dozen studios in that partner studio program where we're just basically, we have a relationship with these studios. We provide them guidance and advice. In most cases, we have a small equity stake in the studios. And in a few of those cases, it's grown into a deeper partnership where Dreamhaven will end up being the publisher of those games.
So the partnership is not necessarily a publishing deal.
No, it's not a publishing deal.
Okay. It's a, hey, we can help guide some of the journey towards a good outcome.
Yeah, that's the hope, and we're fortunate to have a very experienced team. So we've been through a lot of this. We also have a lot of connections in the industry, whether it's with VCs or just talent in general. And so, we can make connections. We can help them with their pitches if they're going out trying to raise money, and just really kind of help them with best practices.
Yeah, right on.
When you said that you were catching a lot of people, what year was this? What was the event? Was this like the big layoffs that occurred 2 years ago?
Well, there have been a lot of layoffs, but even before the layoffs, there was just a lot of people leaving to start up new companies. And I think that, when we started, it was end of 2019, beginning 2020. So
just
this is
before the pandemic.
pre-COVID, just like right pre-COVID. But back then it was a lot easier to get funded.
Yeah. That makes me think. I got two questions sort of related there. One is a sort of a strategy question. One is like a super important question. I'll start with the super important question, which is, how did you come up with the name
Dreamhaven?
Yeah. I'm fascinated about naming. It's like naming is so hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard because most of the names that you come up with, they're already taken. And so we did multiple rounds of brainstorming, where people are just coming up with all these names. We had people throughout the company submitting names into the process. Our steering team, which is like our executive committee kind of group, really looked at all these names, and we narrowed it down to a few, but I think Dreamhaven really kind of came to the top. I fell in love with Dreamhaven because it really kind of captures the feeling that we want to have at this company, like a haven for dreams, like a place that, one of the ideas, we want this to be a great place for creators to do their best work, and that sort of, to me, means that the environment and the company is really supporting that creative process. That means you're not always on the path. Sometimes you think you're on the path and you find out you're not on the path. You have to switch paths, and it's just a very can be very chaotic and very, very messy. And you want it to feel supportive and safe for people to be able to innovate.
Yeah.
So Dreamhaven.
So the name fits. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how are you setting things up? So I get exactly what you're saying, and that support and the ability to give teams the space to get on a different path, etc. Often that comes down to time, and time, as we all know, is money. So how are you setting things up as a new company to be able to afford to do that?
Yeah. So I would say for the first year or so, my wife Amy and I funded the company as we kind of looked around. We really didn't have to look very hard because people were just contacting us constantly.
Cool.
Like as soon as they found out we were doing something, they were very interested in.
I guess it helps to have that big list of like #1 franchises on the resume. That doesn't hurt.
Helps a lot.
That's advice for anyone coming up in industry. Just have like 8 to 10
Yeah.
billion-dollar franchises on your resume.
Yeah.
Key to success.
It helps.
Okay.
So we
so
were
you-
able to find an investor who was bought into what we're trying to do, um, and really supportive of the idea that we wanted to maintain control. So Amy and I still have control of the company, and we just have a very supportive investor who is not interested in any kind of limelight as a result of the investment, and so wishes to remain anonymous.
Oh, right on. So one single like
Yeah,
institutional investor or like angel investor?
I think you would call him an angel.
Got it. Okay.
Cool.
Right on. Did you announce how much you raised? I know that's a very personal question.
We didn't announce anything. No,
Okay. Do you
no,
want
we
to say
really
how
want
much
to
you
keep
raised?
focus on the company and the games.
Okay. You're not going to say how much you raised.
No.
Okay. Very good.
Alex is okay.
Okay. Here is my
No, because the problem is that when you start talking about that, and that becomes the headline, and that's what everybody's
Yeah.
talking about. We
No,
just
no,
want to
yes,
keep
totally.
it on
Yep.
the
Yep.
games and the company.
Right on. No, I love that. The other question I had, which that period of time, I think you already said something like this, that there were a lot of folks that kind of exiting places that have done big games, especially like some of the free to play games, et cetera, and we're starting new studios. And in that, I think 1920, 21, before 22, I think a lot of companies did get funded. And there were kind of a lot of companies that were sort of working towards building a game that was designed to be a big game to rival some of the big, billion-dollar
Yeah.
games that were out there. And that was a investment thesis of that time. I think that's kind of past now.
Yeah.
But you sort of conceptualized something different. Was that intentional? Like, I know it was intentional, but was that like looking at past experience, thinking, well, I know this is a model that I like and works, so this is what I want to try and bring to the future? Or were you thinking about what other folks were doing at all? And, that seems either, oh, that's interesting, but no, or I don't think that's a good idea, but no. Like, I'm
So I
just
think we're
curious
always
about the
looking
strategy
around.
behind
Yeah, we're always looking around at what other people are doing and what's working and what's not working. I think that when we first set out, the belief that we had is, and what we've seen work in the past is, you get a strong, capable team, and they're able to navigate all the twists and turns of game development. And so often you start off thinking you're going to make a thing, and what that is ends up changing a lot during the course of development. And the stronger teams are able to navigate that and end up producing something really incredible. And so that's kind of what we were trying to capture. I think that that's not to say that, the idea, the game, the genre, the positioning, those things are all very important. So you have a thesis when you go in and you start developing a game. There's an area of the market that you feel is underserved, or maybe the leader in the genre, you can see some major issue that's holding it back from being more successful, that you feel like you have a solution to. Like any of those things, I think are really important. But as you go into development and you start playing the game, you find out whether the design is working and accomplishing those goals or not. And usually, in my experience, the answer is it's not, and you have to go and make some changes and iterate, try out new things, and then a ton of polish.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
you answered a better question than the one I asked. But so back in my Bungie days, we used to talk about the Blizzard model, which I don't know that it was a thing, but we thought it was a thing, which was, I think, essentially that, which is basically just the best possible execution. And I don't know, I've always believed that was a result of iteration, but I think you're saying yes, and also a result of kind of being honest with yourself of like, is this doing what we want it to do? And not being afraid to say no.
Well, yeah, but
Because
that's also part of the iterative process, right?
yeah,
So you have to
right.
be willing to change the things that aren't working and
Yeah.
go back. And sometimes that means like we went back and looked, and I think Blizzard canceled like half of the projects that we started. We never,
Wow.
of course, set out as like, oh, we think it's a great idea to cancel half of the things that we do. Of course not. It's always painful every time you have to say no. This isn't working for one reason or another, or we don't think that we think that the market has moved on. We think that the opportunity cost of trying to fix the game is way higher than the potential of what this can achieve in the market. All of those things are potential reasons for canceling something, but it's never easy.
Yeah. Yep. I think Supercell does something similar, with just a really high bar.
Yeah.
Results speak for themselves, I guess.
Can I ask you this might be, I don't know if you want to answer this question, but it's it's related to what you said with canceling games and why you would cancel them and stuff. And you remember that Cosmic Horse y'all did for WoW? I think it was like the first mount you could buy. I bought it. They say that, and I don't know if this is true. This could just be like internet rumors, but they say that horse itself made so much money. It made more money than all of StarCraft 2 made, or more than StarCraft 2 made. And I don't know if that's true, but is it true?
I don't think it's true.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear.
I think if you just want to take all of that revenue and say, this is all profit, and then you want to look at the profit of StarCraft 2, maybe you're closer.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. But I don't know
WoW
if that's
is a big
fair
game.
way to look at it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a better way to look at it. You're right.
StarCraft 2 was a very expensive project.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons it was so expensive is because of all of the single player pre-rendered cinematics,
which were
so
awesome.
we did spend a ton of money on that,
which are so cool. Yeah,
they are so cool, and that franchise is so awesome. So, I don't know. I don't know if it really matters. The game is awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. I'm gonna sleep better. I used to collect mounts and pets. I love it. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
Right on. Well, I thought maybe we should get in the Wayback Machine a little bit and talk about
let's go there.
Like the formative years. You grew up in SoCal, I think, right?
I did, yeah.
Grew up in SoCal, college SoCal, and have lived in SoCal. So you are
what, LA?
You are as OC as they come, right?
Well, so I grew up in the Valley, San Fernando Valley.
Right.
I went to UCLA. So LA, really greater LA until after college. I got a job down in Orange County in Irvine with Western Digital. That was my first job out of college.
The hard drive makers, the Western Digital.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So they also had a division that made network cards. And I got a job in the network card division writing test software to test their network cards.
Oh. Nice. Were you a CS major in college?
I wasn't. I was double E, but I loved computers. And
what is double E?
Electrical engineering.
Oh, electrical. Okay, cool.
Yeah, electrical engineering. So,
it's a little further on the nerd graph from CS, right? Is it a little further up?
It might be, yeah. I was just really interested in understanding how stuff worked. I was just fascinated, and it's just amazing. We use all these devices, and we just really don't understand how they work.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, well, electrical engineers must know. They're building these things. They must know how it all works. And so I was very fascinated with that. And as I got into electrical engineering, I just went more and more on the digital side, and then computer architecture, and then low-level programming. And then, that's kind of as far as I went. I took a class in C programming that was an elective. It wasn't even for my major, just because I was interested in learning it. Yeah, and then so while I was there, I had a couple classes with this guy, Alan Adham, and he was CS and E. And Alan was completely driven. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He was going to start up a game company after college. He'd already published a couple of games for the Apple II and Commodore 64. And he started recruiting me, just, hey, Mike, here's what I'm planning to do. This is, I think you should join me. And I'm like, I don't actually have a programming background. I didn't study programming. I don't know anything about writing games. And so I actually had him come over to my house and pitch my dad so my dad could hear the pitch or whatever. And my dad said, yeah, this sounds very risky. I don't think you should do it. So at first I turned him down and I said, okay, I'm just going to stay at Western Digital. I think this isn't right. And then Alan came back and asked again. And he said, I think his selling point was, look, Mike, it's not rocket science. We're both really smart. We can figure out how to do all of this stuff. I can help you. And then he also talked about how the gaming industry was like this very rare situation where you could have a couple people sitting in a room with very low capital investment, creating something that could reach thousands of people, right? And back then you were manufacturing, you were printing discs and selling them, but still, in terms of the creation, very small investment that could actually scale pretty well. And so I just decided to take the leap of faith. I was only at Western Digital for about 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And then, so you were in the very early days, you were writing code for the early games?
Yeah. That was
in C or like assembly? Did you write assembly code?
So we did. So back then, the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, those systems didn't have an operating system. You were talking directly to the hardware. So the Super Nintendo was the 65816 processor, and the Sega was a 68000.
Oh, right on. So
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
So the 65816 actually was sort of a 16-bit version of the 6502, which is what
Right.
the Apple II used, back in the day. And so it's actually pretty easy to port old Apple II games to the Super Nintendo. And that's what RPM Racing was.
And the Viking game too? Wasn't that was when he?
Yeah, Vikings was one of the first games, although that wasn't a port. That was totally original.
Totally original, yeah. That's cool.
And it's actually another interesting story. So we did a lot of work with Interplay Productions in the early days. It started off, we were doing these ports for them, porting their games from the PC to the Macintosh or the Amiga. But they had actually approached us to write a scripting engine that they could use for their console games. And they had hired Alan to do that. And so one of Alan's first projects was writing this scripting engine. And as part of the deal, we got a royalty-free license to continue using the engine. And so that Lost Vikings was built on that engine.
Well, that's cool.
Oh, right on. We had Bryen Fargo on last year, and he told a bit of that story from his perspective. So it's fascinating, the relationship between the two. I don't know how many people even know about that part of gaming history, but that's super fascinating.
Yeah, Bryen was sort of like he was a mentor to Alan.
Right on. So but when you were growing up in high school, so this must have been, I'm guessing we're similar age, like 80s, I'm guessing?
Yeah. I graduated high school in 85.
Okay, right on. And did you have like a computer in the house, or was tech?
We did.
Or
we had an IBM
games?
PC,
All right,
two
right
floppy disks.
Nice. You had IBM.
64K of RAM.
I had this Mac, and in the house. Were you playing games in high school?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We had a bunch of games. I remember there was a dungeon crawler called Temple of Apshai.
Temple of Apshai.
So I played a bunch of that. You know, you'd go out and you'd go on adventures. You have to go back to town, sell your stuff, buy stuff. It was pretty fun. You know, we also played some of the Microsoft Decathlon, Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Oh yeah.
The Flight Simulator, this is like one of the very early versions of Flight Simulator. So they only had the terrain really mapped out around the airports. And so one of my friends used to come over and we'd chart these long flights, you know, from one airport to another airport. Sometimes it took like a couple hours for the flight to happen. And so we'd set it up going and then we'd play a game of Risk while it was flying. And then when we got far enough and we'd land the
Risk. That's great.
plane.
Are there board games like D&D and stuff like that? Or
a little bit of D&D. I didn't really have a great D&D group, so it was really mostly me just reading the books and making up my own very imbalanced dungeons, you know.
Awesome. All right, but so you when you got to UCLA, you were kind of I don't know if it's technically minded, but you were like, you wanted to know how things work. You wanted to sort of open the lid and
Alex, I skipped something really important because you asked about games. We actually got a gaming console.
Okay.
So
which one?
The Bally Professional Arcade.
Oh, okay.
It was a higher end competitor to the Atari 2600. And the special thing about this one was you could get a basic cartridge for it that let you program it.
Ooh.
And so it was like, it had a little keypad built into the console.
Yeah.
Like a calculator keypad. And the cartridge came with like these colored overlays. So you could type in keywords like with different color shift codes. And like say like blue 5 is like go to or something like that. And you could type in these programs. And that was my first exposure to programming.
We'll be right back. If you like what you're hearing, like and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. And now, a word from our sponsors. Great games aren't just made, they're crafted. Pixel by pixel, idea by idea. Amber doesn't just develop games, Amber forges the future of play, one project at a time. From the magic makers at Disney to the tech giants at Amazon and Warner Media, the biggest names in the industry trust Amber to turn their wildest ideas into reality. Why? Because the talented teams at Amber believe in pushing every boundary, breaking every mold, and having a bit of fun while they're at it. Need a partner who knows the game and plays to win? Amber has the talent, the passion, and a global network that's ready to roll. So let's skip the loading screen and get straight to the action. Discover how Amber can power up your next project at amberstudio.com. Do you want your game to live forever? To supercharge it with immense powers of endless content, a buzzing gamer community, immortality, and coin? CurseForge for Studios, an exclusive service for visionary game developers, allows you to add safe, cross-platform mods to your game and enjoy all the benefits of user-generated content without any of the risks. With CurseForge for Studios, you can harness the creativity of our 165,000 devoted creators and the traffic of 43 million monthly gamers. You can also level up with premium mods and grant your game new revenue streams. Trusted by AAA studios, CurseForge for Studios is an immortality potion for your game. Enter studios.curseforge.com and join the UGC era. Leveling up your game dev career but not sure where to start?
Maybe you're trying to break into the industry, looking to connect with other people who are making games.
Consider joining the International Game Developers Association, the IGDA. the world's largest nonprofit member-driven professional association serving all individuals who create games.
I was in the IGDA in Chicago, met a lot of people. Great way to network.
The IGDA exists to support and empower game developers around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers,
Discounts,
educational and advocacy-based resources,
mentorship.
and solidarity across 160-plus chapters.
To join the IGDA, visit igda.org/membership and use the code IGDA 4th Curtain 15. No spaces there.
To get 15% off 1- and 2-year memberships, as well as a student membership.
Joining the IGDA is a great move for your career, and as a nonprofit supporting everyone making games, it's a great move for the whole community. Join today. Hey listeners, it's Alex from the 4th Curtain.
And Darren here. We want to give a quick shout out to the team at High Vibe PR.
High Vibe PR is our boutique communications firm. They're all about companies and brands defining the future of gaming, entertainment, and culture.
Look, when you're doing something big, you need the right people to help you tell your story. And High Vibe PR, they're the best at making it happen.
Absolutely. They've helped us at Look North World level up our messaging, connect to the right audiences, and stay ahead of the curve in this ever-changing industry.
So, if you're looking for a PR partner who gets gaming and entertainment like no one else, check them out at highvibepr.com.
That's highvibepr.com. Go give them a look. You won't regret it.
And now, back to the show.
Wow.
This is
And
awesome.
did they send you programs that were just like printed on paper that you would then kind of do that to like
So there
put
was
them in, or
there was a guy who put out a newsletter every month that I subscribed to. I was in 6th grade, right?
yes.
But I'm getting this newsletter and I'm so excited about it. And I'd get these every month. He would publish, people would send in programs and he'd publish them and I would type them in on the thing. And then I'd have to save them off to cassette tape. It had an interface, 300 baud. So
Oh yeah.
relatively slow, you'd save it off to cassette tape and you'd load it up next time you wanted to play because there was no, permanent storage on the device.
Yeah, but that was like the very, very much the sophisticated console, like compared to the 2600.
Yes.
Yeah. It was,
Yeah,
and
that was really cool.
was that like you asked for that, or is that like your dad or your parents like picked
No,
that out?
so
to bring
the
home?
Atari 2600 came out and I think our friend up the street might have gotten it and we're like, oh man, we need to get one of these. And they were selling it at Fedco, which is like this discount store that, if you wanted a good deal, you go to Fedco. So my dad was trying to teach us to, don't make a purchase like this right away, got to shop around. And so we went and looked and it turned out, they had the Bally Professional Arcade also. And so my brother, sister, and I, mostly my brother and I think my sister was kind of along for the ride because she wasn't really very interested in this thing, but we pulled all our money together, all of our savings to put towards this Bally Professional Arcade. And we still couldn't quite afford it. And so my dad made up the difference.
That's
And
right
I
on.
remember getting that thing. I was so excited.
The box looks great. It's all
Yeah,
colorful.
it was
Has all this
awesome.
stuff.
You have two siblings. Where are you in the?
I'm
In
the
the order.
oldest.
You're the oldest. Okay. And did your parents do it? Like, were they working? Did they do anything sort of technical or entertainment adjacent, or?
No. My dad was a florist. It was a
Okay.
family business started by my grandfather.
Oh wow.
He and my uncle were partners in it. And so we grew up basically helping out at the flower shop on holidays. They delivered flowers to the studios. They were in Burbank. So that was probably the closest they got to Hollywood.
Okay, but some
and my
definitely on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, my mom was a school teacher until we were born, and then after that she taught at a preschool.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
She used to teach 3rd grade before that.
Right on. So I was just going to say, definitely some kind of entrepreneurship in the past, and in the family. That's
Yep.
That's very cool. Okay, well, so I was going to say before. I mean, it sounds like when you got to UCLA, games was a thing that you were into. But I don't know, put words in your mouth, but was like a career in games even sort of a thing that you had thought of, like it.
I hadn't even considered that. No.
Yeah, it wasn't until Alan was like, Mike, come on, we gotta go do this.
You said you didn't know anything about how to make games and stuff and coding. Did the Bally kind of give you a little confidence there? Because to see it from nothing to something?
Yeah, not really, because there's just a huge leap from what I was exposed to in terms of programming on the Bally relative to like, the types of games you'd get on like a Nintendo console or something. I looked at that. I'm like, yeah, I have no idea how they're doing any of that. And Alan would just break it down and he'd say, no, it's actually not that complicated. Here's what's going on behind the scenes. So that gave me a little bit of confidence.
Yeah.
Right on. All right. Well, so you get out of school, you're at Western Digital for a hot 6 months. You decide to throw all that away. Your big career in hard drive innovation. And you go and join Alan, and Blizzard is born.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Was it boring at Western Digital? Did you like doing that work, or was it like...
It was not boring. No, it was fun. I liked it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like that was at the moment, not just in hindsight, but at the moment, a big decision. You asked your dad for advice. He gave you some certain advice. You ended up doing something different. This all sounds very reminiscent. This is kind of my origin story too. But was that like at the moment, was that a hard kind of agonizing decision? I don't know. Like, I've got kids now who are sort of at that age, and they like every decision is rightfully so. It's the biggest decision of the life, Yeah.
What helped make it a little bit easier was really I think just I was pretty ambitious, and I think it was like the financials of it made it a little bit easier, believe it or not, because it's like this huge risk, going off and doing this thing. But when I had taken the job at Western Digital, I had another offer. So I had done an internship before I graduated, and that company made me an offer that was higher than the Western Digital job. But I wanted to stay in Southern California. The other one was up in the Bay Area, and I ended up choosing that. And they knew that they were below my other offer, and what they promised me was in 6 months we'll give you a 6-month review and you'll get a salary increase. And so 6 months came up, and I'm having these conversations with Alan. So 6 months comes up, and I get my review, and they give me like a 3% raise, prorated to 6 months. So 1.5% raise, which is like nothing, and it's still not even close to what I would have been making at the other company. I'm just like, wow, this is gonna go so slow. I had no idea. And so I'm like, okay, let's talk some more, Alan. And I think that just kind of made me a lot more open to taking, a risk.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And you're young, so what do you got to lose?
That's what my cousin that I really looked up to. I told him about the situation, and his advice was, look, you're young. What have you got to lose? If it doesn't work out, just go get another job somewhere.
Yeah.
And that made a lot of sense too.
Yeah. So how long from when you guys started till you weren't anxious about that decision anymore? Like, when did it get to a point where you're like, hey, I think this is gonna work?
I never looked back on the decision. So I never thought, oh man, I should have stayed at Western Digital. I was learning so much. I mean, everything we were doing was new, and we were learning, and we were super excited. Shipping games is so exciting, and creating something that people can play. Like, I always wanted to figure out how to use technology to do cool things, which is like exactly gaming. That is using technology to do cool things and entertain people. So I never looked back on the Western Digital decision. The first few years, though, from a cash flow perspective were very tough. So Alan and I didn't take a salary for the first couple of years. We did have to loan money to the company to make sure we were making payroll. We eventually had to get we set up a secured credit line with a local bank. So we got our parents to deposit money into an account that we could borrow against. And at the time we sold the company in 94, we had completely maxed out our credit line. So, I mean, cash flow was very difficult, and we never really caught up from a cash flow perspective until after we sold the company.
Really? Even with like Warcraft 2 and...
Well, we sold the company in 94 before Warcraft 1.
Oh, okay.
What?
So how many times did Blizzard change hands?
So that's a great question. So originally we sold to Davidson Associates, which made educational software.
That's right.
Okay. And then
that was Ken. Was that Ken and Roberta Williams?
No, that was Bob and
that
Jan
was Sierra.
Davidson.
Okay. And then
Ken and Roberta's Sierra. And so what happened
Sierra, that was the second.
CUC came in and they bought Davidson and Sierra on the same day to create CUC software.
Got it.
Then they changed their name to Descendant. They sold off software to a French company called Havas Interactive, which was owned by Vivendi.
That's right.
And then, lots of drama ensued, and we ended up, they ended up basically acquiring a majority stake in Activision by contributing the software business, including us, and a bunch of cash.
Wasn't Universal part of this equation at some point?
Vivendi ended up merging with Universal to create Vivendi Universal. And then they're the ones who ended up acquiring part of Activision, basically spinning off software.
Right. I remember, but I had kind of forgotten that whole chain. Like I do remember meeting Alan in Ken Williams' office up at Sierra. And that would have been right. I would think it was like the week Diablo shipped. And we were giving them a demo of Myth. I don't know if you remember the
nice
Bungie game Myth.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable how you were able to make the studio thrive, like really thrive through all of those changes. I mean, like each one of those could have been just remarkably distracting, and new folks in the mix could have like taken and randomized, etc. How did you kill it? Like how did you do so good through all of that change?
Yeah. So we tried to insulate the rest of Blizzard as much as possible for all of the change and turmoil that was happening above us. Every time we got a new owner, we tried to sort of, I guess maybe to back up, when we sold the company to Davidson Associates, right? We're just like 4 years in, right? 4 years out of college, something like that. And so, we don't have a ton of experience dealing with mergers and acquisitions and companies getting acquired. All we knew is we wanted to make great games. We wanted to focus on game development. We didn't really want to have this be part of like a big corporate thing. And the pitch to us was, which I think sounds like the pitch to like any company getting acquired, now that I have more experience, which is, don't worry, nothing's going to change. The reason we want to acquire your company is because we love what you're doing. You guys know about entertainment software. We don't really know about that. Our business is educational software. You just keep doing exactly what you're doing. You'll have full creative autonomy and control. You'll also have access to our sales and distribution and capital resources to be able to continue, doing what you're doing. And that pitch sounded great. Of course, we never got any of that in writing, that like we had this freedom or whatever, but we operated as if we did. That was our agreement. That's what we signed up for. And so what ended up happening is, I think 2 years later, Bob and Jan were out and new management was in because they got acquired and Bob and Jan left. And so our first conversation with them was sitting down with this new person saying, okay, well, here's how we want to operate. Basically, you leave us alone and we'll continue making great games that do really well. And by then we had started to build up a track record. And, each successive game that we released did even better than the last one. So our new owners became believers really quick. And they became very supportive owners that let us operate the company with sort of this illusion that we still owned it. And we operated it as if it was still ours, even though it wasn't. But like, that was the mentality that we had, that we're going to make all the decisions using basically prioritizing long-term value creation is how we thought of it. And which makes it very easy to not ship a broken game. Even if you're going to miss Christmas, or even if you're going to miss whatever quarterly estimate that you thought you were going to hit. Like, it's just a no-brainer. If the game is not at its full potential, you got to fix it. And then you fix it and you release it and it does great. And then everybody's like, oh, okay, I guess things aren't broken. We're not going to mess with it. And so for a long time, we had a series of owners, and I had a series of people that I reported to that really just were helpful.
That's A, that's awesome. B, I think that's rare. It's like the way you just summarized the alignment of operate this way, success comes because we're operating this way. Sounds exceptionally logical, but it doesn't always happen.
I know.
But yeah, I think
we would say that too. We would say that like you could trust the Blizzard game; it's going to work. There's going to be no bugs. It's going to work.
Well, and if it doesn't work, we're going to fix it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we didn't have some of the launches were not so smooth, right? But we just were committed to fixing them, and we did, and we fixed them. And then I think people don't dwell on the fact that you couldn't. We had some issues. The World of Warcraft launch was not a awesome launch. It took us months to be able to get our servers to be stable and to handle the capacity and all that stuff. And, people also talk about the Diablo 3 launch not being one of the smoothest launches either. But ultimately, the thing is that the games were good. And, we did what it took to get them working again.
Yeah. That was one of the things I was maybe most curious about. And you've talked a bit about what goes into that unbroken string of just really outstanding games. How does Mike sort of make that happen? What is it about the way that you either think about games or manage teams or recruit, or like what part of that whole thing is sort of your way?
Yeah, I think, so I was in a unique situation, which I think you also can relate to, right? But as being a founder in a, organization that, a larger organization, there is a certain amount of power that you have, sort of like moral authority to be able to say stuff, say the truth, say, what you're willing to do, that people who aren't founders maybe don't have. And maybe they're also a little bit more concerned about whether or not they're going to keep their job. So they're not willing to sort of stick their neck out and say, no, this isn't ready. We're not going to ship it, or something like that. I think that we had a very aligned group of people at Blizzard. People came to Blizzard because a lot of them were fans of the Blizzard games, and so they understood what the brand promise, what the brand stood for to people, and would hold us accountable when they thought we weren't living up to that, which is great. And so often the team and the leadership of the team, they know what the right decision is, they know what the game needs to achieve its potential. They know what the right decision is for the players, for the long term of the business. But then they're up against, but our goal for this year is X, and we're not going to achieve our goal. And so how do you balance those two? And I think that's where, having a founder-led studio with strong values to be able to say, no, we have to live up to our brand expectation. That's our commitment to our players, and that is going to pay dividends in the long run, because it's very difficult. You only have one chance to make a first impression, sort of thing. If people come and they try the game and they don't like it, then you maybe lost them forever. So got to make sure that they have a great experience right off the bat. At least that was what we tried to do. And so I think setting it up so people are empowered to fight for what they think is the right decision, and then having a structure of checks and balances so that we can debate and argue these things and come up with what we think is the right holistic decision, taking everything into account, and then having the agency to be able to actually execute on that. So all that has to work. And I think that, as you're part of a large organization, especially a public organization, there is so much pressure on the shorter term financial results that it makes it very, very difficult for most companies. And eventually the short term pressures and the Wall Street pressures ultimately win and start kind of almost forcing some of these decisions that aren't necessarily the best for the games, for the players, even for the employees.
So, so it sounds like you were able to navigate that because you had the track record. And I assume that when you were part of, say, like part of Activision Blizzard, that the management whose jobs were who are accountable to the board and Wall Street took that into consideration, I'm assuming, when planning things like dates? Or were there times where you were just like, look, we need more time, so we are going to miss this date, so you're going to have to go and revise what our reporting is, and that was the decision that got made?
Yeah, you do everything you can to try to. So everybody working on these games, I think this, wants to ship them as soon as possible, right? They've been working on the games for a long time. They want to get them out there, probably more than anybody. And if it's not ready, you have to make an assessment. So the leadership has to make an assessment. Usually the executive producer will have an opinion about this, and then that would be a conversation that we would talk about. And no amount really of will or desire is necessarily going to change the state of the game. If you know early enough, you can put more resources on it and maybe make a difference. But usually you've tried and it didn't work.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like you built a culture that was...
We tried not to make commitments that we couldn't keep. And so we
couldn't keep.
Hesitated to announce things publicly so that because once you announce it publicly, it's a lot harder to move. But internally, you have to make estimates, and it has to go into a budget, and then you do your best to hit those things.
Yeah.
You know.
You make it sound so easy. So logical, at least. Not easy. Logical. Not always logical. Cool. Okay. Let's shift to the future, I guess. It feels to me like the industry, like what I love about games is that it changes all the time. Like I had a 2600 growing up, and those games are still awesome, but just to look at the progression of where the tech and the art and the play and everything has gone, it's bonkers. And same thing on the business side, from packaged goods to digital goods to free to play to all these different platforms. And just thinking about like what our studio is doing now is something I never thought I would ever be doing, which is I'm basically building games inside of other games, and that's a whole new thing. And I'm just curious if part of your vision for Dreamhaven is sort of contemplates a future that maybe looks different from sort of like the model that you and I kind of grew up with, where you would make a game and you would sell it, and then there's a point of sale and people play, and there's this value chain, whatever. It's like are you doing things that are maybe interesting from that perspective, about like either different business models, different platforms, even different like game lengths, that kind of price points, any of that kind of stuff?
So there's a lot of different ways to think about this stuff. I think we probably think about business model last, and think about the opportunity that we see, the type of game that we want to make, and then we think about like what is the business model that we can wrap on that is the best for the game, that incentivizes the right thinking for the development team, that is gonna be best for the game. And so we're very early in. We talk a lot about layering in complexity over time, and so starting Dreamhaven and starting these studios and building these new teams, working with Unity and Unreal, and for some of these people, working with them for the first time, because Blizzard used a lot of proprietary engines that we had developed in-house. So not all of our team members have had experience working with Unity and Unreal. So that's kind of a new thing. Shipping games on Steam, that's new for me. I've been shipping on our owned platform for all of these years, Battle.net. And so I think not trying to jump in and boil the ocean and do too many new complex things all at once was one of our goals, and so these I think these first two games that we're developing internally are really trying to just be just games. They're just games that are trying to be really fun, and I think following that, we can start thinking about how to do more complicated things, complex things.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Are any of I was going to ask if any other platforms besides PC and console are interesting to you, but I guess that's a down the road kind of thing. Or
yeah, I think we're fans of VR. We would have to have the right idea to go and pursue that. And I don't know what that is, but I think that there's a lot of exciting things happening in VR. But but I would say, yeah, right now we're probably mostly focused on PC and console, and then mobile is something that we're very interested in if we had the right things. And Sunderfolk is a bit of a hybrid because it does use a mobile interface to interact with the game. And so that, the game is basically being released across all of these devices.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
That is cool.
What kinds of things are you playing? If you have time to play games these days.
So most recently, Blueprints.
It's like you like making blueprints in Unreal. Or are you building a building?
Building a building, yeah, building a building. So that I'm playing Mechabellum, which is a game we're publishing, but that we fell in love with and have really been enjoying the game, and so super excited to be involved in it now.
Oh, right on.
Cool.
That's awesome. All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for spending a morning with us. Are you an early riser in general?
I am since our daughter was born 10 years ago, but before that, I was never an early riser.
Yeah, it's funny how having kids will change a lot of things about a person. Yeah, my morning is I love the mornings because it's like the only time of day that I have completely to myself.
Yeah, I can understand that. The problem is I'm just too tired in the morning. But
well, you gotta get yourself some coffee.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for spending the morning with us.
Yeah, Mike,
the new games look fantastic. Have you announced any? I'm guessing you haven't announced dates yet.
So Wildgate is going to be doing its second community preview next week. We haven't announced a date for it other than to say it'll be coming later this year. And then Sunderfolk is already out.
Cool.
Did the community preview, is that open?
It is not open, but I believe it's going to be pretty easy for people who are in to invite their friends. So if you know anybody who is in, then it'll be easy for you.
Yeah, I know a guy. His name is Mike.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're in. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's no problem.
Yes. Yeah. Right on. All right. Thanks so much, Mike. Best of luck with Dreamhaven and the games. I know you don't need the luck, but good luck to you.
We could use all the luck we can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Mike.
Yeah.
We'll see you around.
Guys.
Thank you for listening to The Fourth Curtain Podcast. Visit us at thefourthcurtain.com to find our monthly newsletter and support the show via Patreon. The Fourth Curtain Podcast is a production of Fourth Curtain Media. Lovingly edited by Bryen Hensley of Noise Floor Sound Solutions. Production support by May Lee with community management by Doug Zartman and art production by Paul Russell. Thanks again for listening.